Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Bible and Archaeology Live, a Friday free-for-all. It's the first Friday of the month, and so we do what we like to do. We have a fun episode every month at the beginning of the month where we have no idea what's going to happen. Largely, we get some early questions from Patreon supporters. There's a way you can send in questions. Do us a favor in helping us know where some of this will go, but largely this is a questions-based episode, so if you're here with us live, we're happy to have you with us. If you're watching this on replay, we do this every month, the first Friday of the month. We'd love to have you with us in the future. Bob, happy March. Happy March Madness. The March Madness is beginning.
Happy March Madness. Hawkeyes pulled one out last night.
Okay, so before we will get to Bible stuff, but you have to indulge us a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, we are proudly here at the University of Iowa with our Hawkeyes, and they are in the Big Ten tournament right now. They have a run of 5 games in 5 days in order to try to advance. I have to be honest, I wasn't that hopeful last night, but they won.
They dispensed with Wisconsin in the first round, but then they came up and upset
Michigan
the higher
State.
seeded Michigan State.
And then now tonight, or the night that we're doing this, Ohio State again, which went to overtime last time. So we'll see how they're doing, but they're playing really well. I mean, Lucy Olson's doing great, but
the rest of the team is playing.
The freshmen are doing great. Hayden is doing wonderful.
Hayden had a career game last night.
I know. So yes, if any of the women's basketball team is watching, we're big fans. If you're ever interested in coming to talk, just send us an email. Let us know.
You can take my Cities of the Bible course as members of your team who have gone on prior to you to incredible things may have taken.
Hey, if anybody that wants to take it, if you want to have conversations, basketball or otherwise, we're big fans.
Yeah.
We're hoping for the best today with Ohio, but also, there's a tournament after this tournament as well. So we love...
Go Hawks.
We love the basketball team. Go Hawks. Hoping for everything well. If you are looking for something to do this evening, there's going to be a great basketball game on. They're going to be playing. Iowa's going to be playing Ohio State. Hopefully things, we got to that overtime last time. Let's seal the deal this time on Ohio and get that upset win that escaped us before, but I think can be in our hands right now.
We beat SC and we should have beat UCLA. I hate when people say we should have beat, but we were there.
We were right. We were right there, but it all bodes well for tournament play. The end of the year is when you need to do good. So
Charlie Cream has us as a number 6 seed in the NC2A bracket, and whatever Charlie Cream says, I do. So he's got us up there. So
So thank you for indulging us.
People who know women's basketball know who Charlie Cream is. He's the guy that does the bracketology. So
thank you for indulging us. We appreciate your patience. We appreciate you tolerating, and hopefully if we can convert some of you to being Iowa basketball fans as well, we're happy to have you there. As we get started, a couple of announcements coming your way. The first is the reminder, we already made the note, but if you join us on Patreon, among the many benefits like early access to ad-free video podcasts, bonus podcasts every week, extra clips from things with videos, with interviews with others, in addition to all that kind of stuff, you can ask questions that will be answered here at Alive. And so if you're interested in that, if there's, your schedule doesn't line up to be here for Alive and you really want to get a question in, that's a way you can do that. So the link is down in the description. We're Bible and Arc on Patreon. If you're interested, come and sign up. We got a couple different tiers that spread things around. There's more information there. Another thing that might be a reason to join Patreon is in April, we're going to be doing our first live event. Well, I say we. Bob largely is going to be doing the live event here in Iowa City. So if you're an Iowa City resident and you're looking for something to do on April 16th, we want to invite you to come join us at the James Theater here in Iowa City for a talk digging into Easter, where Bob is going to dig into Easter, the traditions, the materials around. And at this event, it's going to be broken into a couple phases. There's going to be a reception mingle time at the front. Then there's going to be the talk, and then there's going to be a live Q&A at the end. And if you're hearing this and you're thinking, I would love to be there, but I don't live in Iowa City, if you join us on Patreon, we are going to be doing a live stream of that talk for our Patreon supporters. It'll only be going to Patreon. It won't be coming here to YouTube, so that will be available if you're looking for some Easter information.
Right.
If you're wanting to be a part of that, that'll be available to our Patreon members, and those Patreon members will be able to submit questions to be a part of that live Q&A that Bob will do with me at the end. So we'll do kind of like a live event Q&A after the talk. If you're on Patreon, you can join us. If you're here in person in Iowa City, you can join us as well. So stay tuned to our socials. We'll be putting out links to where you can get tickets, where you can get updates, all that kind of stuff. But April 16th, Iowa City at the James Theater.
That's right. And we've done live courses. I've done courses in Coralville at the Center for Performing Arts. We've done it here at Film Scene at the Chauncey, where I've done live courses before, but this will be a one-time event where we're just going to be talking about Easter.
Yeah.
So please join us in person or join us on Patreon. Again, not on YouTube, but join us on Patreon if you want to be a part of that.
Yeah, the reception hour will start at 6. The talk will start at 7. Question and answers after. If you're looking for what kind of time, it'll be in the evening. It's not going to be middle of the day. It won't be at 11 o'clock like this. But in that week leading up to Easter, feels like there's no better time to have that happen. So look forward to seeing you there. You'll see some updates and more materials coming ahead. But we wanted to mention that now as inevitably the slate of Easter content starts to roll out and comes your way. One last note on the Patreon side of things. A question that came from Patreon for this month before we get to some of the questions in the comments right now. So Amanda, your question from Patreon. Can each of you nerd out for a bit? We can do that for a long time.
Yeah.
We'll keep it to a bit.
Professional nerds.
On something in your current research that has really fascinated you. What about it is interesting to you? Okay, Bob. Start with you.
Okay.
Something that's fascinating you right now.
Okay. Well, as many of you know, I wrote a book on Melchizedek that came out a few years ago, and I promised in the book to come out with a second volume on this, which picks up from the biblical story of Melchizedek and walks us through everything that happens to this Melchizedek character through the Second Temple period. This is about finished, and I want to wrap this up and get this published. So I continue my fascination with the biblical character of Melchizedek. And of course, what happens to Melchizedek in the Second Temple period is fascinating because he's so enigmatic in the Bible that everybody says, well, I think he does this, and I think he does this. So all of these different sectarian groups, interpretive groups in the Second Temple period do different things with him. So the Christians do one thing, the Dead Sea Scrolls community does something else. He's treated different ways. And so that's what this book looks at. So that's one of the things I'm nerding out on. I've got some others, but I want to hear one of yours first.
Well, I mean, so obviously as Bob's student, I'm not doing Melchizedek, but if you hear this answer and you think this sounds kind of familiar, what I'm nerding out on right now, Amanda, is the character of Phineas in Numbers, who is another small character who shows up for a moment in time, has a very minimal presence in the biblical text, but becomes one of these dramatic, significant characters after the biblical canon, if you want to use that type of term, closes. So in the Second Temple period, the same as Melchizedek, gets picked up by a wide variety of groups. The Hasmoneans want him, the Zadokites want him, the Qumran community maybe does or does not want him. He's in conflict sometimes with Melchizedek. He's all over the place. So for me right now, that's where my time is going in writing. He's my dissertation topic. And so spending time with him and where his promise comes from. Promise material like Schniedewind, odd character material like yourself. And so happy to spend time kind of in the roots of that family tree. And a fun place to be. And it's one of those types of things. I think the same as like reading through your Melchizedek book, that as I work through this, a question that I think, tags with something Amanda had asked on Patreon as well is they had a question when you're doing research like this, as you're looking through something, how do you start to identify for yourself when you've come to a point that you've done enough reading to start in on something? How do we know when we've read enough of the literature that we're not going to come across somebody that already made the argument or said the exact opposite? How do you feel that out for yourself, Bob?
This is a great question. The answer is you have never done enough reading. You've never done enough research. You've never done and anybody who's ever published a book, a responsible book, so a research volume, knows that the second you send off your final corrections and you send this off for publication, that's the day that you discover that article that's like, oh my gosh, this is a key essential thing. How come I didn't include this? That happens to every author ever, right? This is something that happens. So you never do enough reading. But I think what it is I start every research question with, I have an idea, and Jordan knows this because I do it to him once a week. I have this idea. I'm in the shower, or I'm sitting on the couch, I'm watching whatever, and I have this idea, and so I come in the next day and I was like, man, I have this idea. here's my idea. Why is this wrong?
Yeah.
So the first thing I try to do is, just like any scientific method, why is this wrong? Shoot this down for me. And then we'll start doing a differential diagnosis, just like if you used to watch House, right? It's wrong because of this. No, It's wrong because of this. It's wrong because of this. Well, this scholar disagrees with you. Well, this scholar disagrees with you. And we'll compile a list of the things we need to check in against to see why this won't stand. And if it's still standing, so this is the equivalent of you're doing your experiments to knock down your theory. And if your theory is still standing, then you say, okay, who else has talked about this? Where else? Somebody already published this. If it's this good of a theory, somebody must have published it. And then you start looking to see, okay, this guy talks about it a little bit, or she over here, she mentions something similar, but she's actually going off over here, or she's trying to make a different point. Okay, so let's mention it, or let's look at it. And so these become, you're starting to create your bibliography, put together your references. And then you're really starting to get into your basic research question. And then you're building off that central research question it's not peripheral, but all of the things that you need to do to build your case. And at the end of the day, you're basically a lawyer, right? You're going to try to prove your central thesis, but in order to do that, you need to lay some basic arguments. So in order to get to here, you need to say, all right, so first of all, we have to all accept that this is true. So how do I prove this? And then how do I prove this? And then how do I prove this? Before you do all that, here's the history of people who have looked into this question. Mm-hmm. So this is your literary, the history of research. This is the first chapter 1.
This is that 2. Chapter 1 lit review where it's here's all the reading that I did.
Every dissertation.
Yeah.
And then you're basically you're a lawyer in a court saying, if A, then B, and if B, then C. And then you're starting to hint at your thesis, and then you come full circle to your thesis, and then you make your point. And so at all along that process, you're trying to circle back to those references that you introduced at the beginning, right? This is all of the evidence we have, and then you're going to try to piece together these pieces of evidence, these credible people that you've introduced at the beginning, to build your case, and then you have to start laying out, here's why my case stands up. And here's why, this is what I do, is I bring in I try to knock down all of the defense arguments. Well, he couldn't have done that because the gloves don't fit, or he couldn't have done that because you didn't find the murder weapon, or whatever. I try to anticipate what the counter arguments will be and then knock those down. And so that's how I go about writing a research volume. But it's inevitable that the second you get this all written and you send it off and you get your edits back and you send it out for review and you get it, as soon as you send that thing off, you're going to discover something that's like, oh my gosh, why didn't I find that?
And that's a part of when people ask questions about why academic writing is so specific, part of it's because of this, because a lot of things have been written. And so the arguments are finding narrower and narrower gaps within things. And the presence of an argument in a similar space doesn't mean you can't have something to say, but you do need to be aware of what the other people are saying. And so, I think that's helpful. Amanda, hopefully that helps answer some of the questions of what we're nerding out about.
Right.
And also how we go through some of that as well. I want to jump down into the comments. Constellation Pegasus here. Thank you for this. They really liked our Lilith discussion with Peter. This was a great conversation. If you didn't see this one, Dr. Peter Miller here from the Classics Department came in to talk with us about the history of Lilith, the identity of Lilith, the tradition behind here, because this is one of those famous names, but like with a lot of famous names, not a lot of the backstories.
Right.
So this was a great episode. I really liked it. Thank you so much for appreciating. I'm glad you enjoyed it too. It tied up some loose ends. If you have follow-up questions about Lilith, Peter's a specialist in many things, but one of Peter's favorite things are some of these, what might get tagged as odd traditions or characters, those things that become a lot in later stuff. All of that is right in Peter's wheelhouse. So if there are other names, if there are other identities like that you have questions about, send it in. Let us know. I'm happy. Peter's just downstairs. I'm happy to go knock on his door and say, excuse me, could you please come back? Because we have a lot of questions about this one. That's how we came to the Lilith conversation.
Yeah, no, he's a fascinating scholar, Peter Miller is. the things that he likes, the things that he enjoys, I mean, ranging from Dungeons and Dragons to anytime I have a question about something, you name it, Pokemon, any board game, any kind of game, right? If it involves a character in a fantasy land, and this is why I say he's going to have an affinity for Lilith. I go in and I say, hey, my kids were talking about this. Oh, yeah.
That has this backstory.
Right. And by the way, yeah, exactly. And here's the guy who originally wrote the book. There's been 3 movie adaptations of it. I mean, this guy's a walking encyclopedia for any kind of fantasy character, any kind of fictional character, any kind of...
Yeah.
You know, if it's been...
He's like an emporium of knowledge for all of those traditions.
And he took that into biblical studies. And so he's the perfect guy to talk about Lilith. And
yeah, so if you have more questions, I'm glad you liked that one. If you have more questions on him, and there are 2 bonus clips from the Peter episode mentioning Patreon over on Patreon. One of them is a conversation with Peter about a comic titled Lilith that takes that Lilith character and goes all new ways with redoing this. And so he reads through. Yeah. He is a game master for Dungeons and Dragons. He leads campaigns there. And so he reads us through the summaries of some of these. So there's some more there if you're interested from him. But Constellation Pegasus, I'm glad you liked that episode. A question here from Aramgard. For Canaanite city-states destroyed during the late Bronze Age, which we talked about some with episodes with J.P. Dessel, do we have any clear evidence of Philistine or Greek conquest in the destructions that we get here? I would say, I know in JP's episode, I want to say in the first one, he talks some about the pottery change, that when we get this distinct style of pottery that starts to come in, this isn't necessarily related to this destruction part, but that this is a marker of a people group coming in. Outside of that, do we have anything that you can think of immediately that's that clear evidence of Philistine or Greek conquest? I think this ties also with the ever-present question of the Sea Peoples, the identity of the Sea Peoples, the presence of the Sea Peoples.
We have got to get Eric Klein here just to, I mean, he this is, you know, his wheelhouse, but I'm trying to think back, all the way back to the research from Dame Kathleen Kenyon, you know, working on, you know, Jericho and this old question about how Jericho was already destroyed by the time that the Israelites would have come in, whether it's early or late, to all of the, to all of the new research coming in from some of these sites that are being excavated.
Yeah.
The archaeology is telling us, and this is the research being done all the way up into the Galilee, all the way down into the Shvelah. Obviously, you've got the evidence of the red slip pottery or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, you have, I think, a difficulty with this. You have the pottery part.
Right.
And at some of these sites, we do have those destruction layers.
Right, correct.
A difficulty, though, in answering this question, I would say, is trying to tie that to a people group.
Yeah,
that's a difficulty, because how do we distinguish this outside of something where you have like a, with Lachish, where they say, oh, we have a tradition that we attacked. Oh, look, we have these arrows. Oh, we have these reliefs.
Correct.
And so you connect those
But
things.
keeping in mind that people, and especially with pottery, people tend to make things the way that either they know to make them or that they were taught to make them, handed down either by a guild or by their parents, grandparents, or whatever. And so that when you see a shift in the way that pottery was making, and again, there is research being done looking at, what do they call, emulation or copycat. So some people try to make pottery that is Egyptian in style.
Yeah.
So you have, Egyptian pottery, but then you've got this Egyptian, this faux Egyptian. They're trying to emulate the Egyptian style, but a real good ceramicist can usually say, oh no, this is an emulation. This is a copycat. So it doesn't mean Egyptian presence.
Yeah.
But it does mean that they're probably being heavy influenced. The Egyptians are seen as something big and powerful, so they want to have pottery that looks like that. The question then is that the case for Canaanites that are coming in, and would they do that for this Canaan? Or are these still an enemy and they would never want to replicate or look like that?
Yeah, and with the presence of pottery, I know some arguments can happen of, were the places destroyed and then these new people come in and we get their pottery? So does their pottery mean that they were the ones that destroyed it, or they came to a place that had been laid in ruins and now settled it? So there can be some difficulty there. Kip Davis is in the comments here, and saying they're very interested in getting you on to talk about Jericho and other Canaanite cities. Kip, I think it would be great to have Bob on with you. So yeah, we need to make that happen. And I think this is one of those questions with these sites that it is debated. This is a thing that people debate because there's the arguments of, does pottery equal presence, or does pottery equal people, or when do these things get dated? There's all these discrepancies or different positions that can make it really hard to establish identity with something.
It's a pretty good indicator, though, because people do tend to create things and make things the way that either they know how to or that they were taught to do it. And if a new group comes in, they're going to bring their tradition and style, unless they're trying to make a political statement.
Yeah.
So some people buy imports because they're trying to make a statement. I'm wealthier than you are, and I'm going to buy the imports from Paris, and I'm going to fill my house with imports from Paris. Or they go the other way, right? I'm going to fill my house with antiques, or I'm a collector, and I'm going to fill my house with collections. People do this who do biblical studies, right? I'm going to fill my home with artifacts that I've collected from Jerusalem or from the Holy Land. And so their entire house looks like, the turn of the century, the 19th century. It looks like, colonial Britain.
It's
right?
the Cabinet of Curiosities living room.
Correct. And they want to be seen as somebody who's exotic and who's an explorer so to what extent do you have that taking place in the late Bronze Age? People trying to, it does take place. We know that in the upper classes, they are importing goods.
Yeah.
Are those the people who are conquering cities, and are those the people who is that the most of the pottery that we find, or are we only finding that in palaces? Are we only finding that up in the Acropolis? So this is what archaeologists are working through. If you're finding in multiple areas and multiple in these different locus throughout a site, if you're finding Canaanite pottery, a pottery continuation throughout the site, then it's hard to argue that another group came in and took over this site if there's a continuation of the pottery, and that they just adopted the way that pottery's always been made. You can argue that, but then you need to explain why you're arguing that. Yeah. Whereas when you've got you can call them the Sea Peoples or the Philistines, when they're coming in down on Gaza and Ekron and Ashkelon and Safi Gath, and when they come in the Pentapolis, you see a definitive break in the pottery, which is evidence that you've got a new people coming in, new customs, new styles, new. And then this is the argument that's being used, sometimes well, sometimes not so well, to argue for things like the conquest of Jericho, right? If there's a change in pottery, does that mean that there's a change in the people? That's the methodology, and then people argue about the actual evidence.
Yeah.
And you just have to remember what's going on, and this goes back to the household archaeology, what's going on up in the Acropolis and in the wealthiest person's house isn't necessarily what's going on throughout the whole city.
Yeah. And yeah, Kip, a comment here that I think is worth pointing out when we're talking about people that may go to places like Jerusalem and bringing things home. Absolutely. Hopefully they are not buying artifacts themselves. Maybe you are buying a painted piece of tile, or you're buying a replica. But yeah, Kip, we're definitely with you that please do not buy artifacts, or don't support that trade. That's something that you don't want to participate in, the buying of those things. So yeah, absolutely. The hope there is that if you are doing that, you're getting something that is a memorial, but not an artifact.
Buy replicas.
Yeah.
Buy things that were handmade by the actual artisans in Jerusalem. You're supporting the local economy, and you're not contributing to forgeries. You're not contributing to the looting of sites. So buy something carved out of olive wood there. Buy something that's supporting the artist colony, the artist community there. And please don't contribute to looting and forgeries. This is something that we actually support. Don't buy antiquities.
Yeah.
I stand behind this. I've stood behind this for a while. Don't buy antiquities.
Yeah, and I mean, as we're doing the tag of old podcasts here through this episode, if you're interested in a conversation with that, we have a conversation with Morag Kerkel.
Yes, yeah.
And Morag has a project, Follow the Pots, doing a lot of work studying this and the problems that emerge out of this. So if you're interested in a conversation about some of all of the ripple effects that type of thing has in a very negative way, I'd say go check that conversation out. It's in the archive. It's great. They're doing a lot of great work. So Aramgard, thank you for the question. I hope that kind of answers. It's a difficult one. It's a complicated one. And yeah, if we can get Dr. Klein on, that might provide a more robust answer as well from their perspective.
And I want to just say special thank you, because I'm trying to do this more. Thank you to Constellation Pegasus, and thank you to Aramgard for your continued support on this channel. We really appreciate it. I personally appreciate it. Y'all have been constant supporters. And I just want to say thank you. I appreciate that.
And to turn to Constellation Pegasus here, second question. One thing they've always wondered about, why didn't the Pharisee and Sadducees fight against each other so that only one was left standing? Seems that their difference would make them fight.
They may have, but we know that they were at odds with each other because it was, oh God, I got to talk to Kenneth Atkinson. It was Salome Alexandra, right? Who before her husband died said, you need to switch allegiances from the Sadducees to the Pharisees because the future is not in the equivalent of the 1%. And remember, what we're talking about here is the Sadducees are essentially the 1%. They're tied to the temple. They're the wealthy aristocratic people who are essentially, they find their power base in the temple and in the goings on at the temple. But they also have differences of beliefs. For instance, it appears that they didn't really fully buy into, I don't want to say the afterlife, but into resurrection. They didn't buy into angels and demons, things like that. I call them old school. They're old school. When you die, you die. You're going to go to Sheol. They tie it more to the things that we find in the text of the Hebrew Bible.
Which is why they are sad, you see, because there is no, right? That's the easy way. It's cheesy, but it'll keep it in your mind if you're trying to remember the distinction.
I remember singing that growing up. Right?
The ones afterlife and no afterlife.
As opposed to the Pharisees, who had already begun building these local community buildings, these local community centers where they could study and they could pray, and they're essentially taking and spiritualizing what it means to be Jewish and how they dress and how they eat. Now, everybody might have been doing this, but they're making the study of the Torah more central to their lives, and they're personalizing it. And so the Pharisees, and by the way, they're the popular, they're the lower middle class, right? Now, most Jews didn't identify with anybody, right? They were just Jewish individuals, and they didn't see themselves as part of a particular party. But these guys believed in an afterlife. This was the popular. They believed in angels and demons, and they believed perhaps in a resurrection or a coming Messiah, things like that. And so when the temple gets destroyed, the Sadducees basically disappear. There are some arguments, and we can dial up Larry Schiffman and talk about, did the Sadducees give rise when the Hasmoneans became the high priest? Did a sect of them break away, become a little apocalyptic, MMT, and give rise to what becomes the Damascus community, and what becomes the Dead Sea Scrolls? There's lots of different sects and sects within sects and groups like this that are going on, but essentially we know that they were at odds with each other, but not to the point where there were open hostilities. But we also know that, I forget if it was Janaeus or Hyrcanus, but when they died, Salome was told, don't depend on the 1% anymore. You need to shift your allegiance to the Pharisees because there's just more of them, and that's going to become what would be the winners, or the people that have the larger power base. And so the Pharisees had a lot of power, even though the Sadducees had control or more authority within the temple and had more wealth.
And this is not to say that these are two of the more famous or well-known divisions here. And they may not be engaging in open hostility.
Correct.
But that doesn't mean that there aren't others who did. And so you do have other groups that are maybe less able to grab the levers of power that do engage in the Sicarii, right? In this
Zealots
type of
and
fighting side. So we do get a diversity where some maybe aren't outright fighting with each other, but they are potentially in the political realm or the realm of the religious traditions of the people, and others that do. There's all kinds of stuff happening.
And just like you see within any political party, like with Republicans or Democrats, you're going to have caucuses. You're going to have groups within these groups, and some groups are going to act a certain way and behave a certain way and push for certain things within that group. They're still part of this larger party, but it's like, we're going to do things this way, and other people over here, we're going to do things. Whereas there might be others that are going to pull more towards the center. Hey, maybe we can work together to keep Rome from coming in and destroying all of us. These analogies worked 2,000 years ago just like they work today, right? If we work together, maybe we can fend off whatever is coming from the outside. If we fight amongst ourselves, we're weaker together and we're going to break down. Keep in mind, the Christians were part of this, right?
Yeah.
Jesus used to hang out with these Pharisees all the time. The Gospel of Luke, right? He's on his way to...
That's why they're always running into each other.
Yeah, he's on his way to, at, or coming from dinner, often with Pharisees, right? Jesus argues like a Pharisee, fences around the Torah. Jesus was, for all intents and purposes, a Pharisee. He and his disciples just see him as the Messiah. He's not just a prophet. He's not just a rabbi and a teacher. He's the Messiah, according to his followers, who were all Jewish early on. And then this is when the split between the Christians and the Pharisees take place. Keep in mind, the Pharisees would become what is essentially rabbinic Judaism. Yeah. So when the temple falls and the Sadducees go away, Qumran goes away, these Essenes go away, you have these Pharisees that basically give rise to rabbinic Judaism.
Because for the Sadducees, that is a thing that cannot be overcome, because their power is rooted within that. So among all the traditions and the emergence of this, I think 2 books, like if we're doing some book recommendations, also good is Roots of Rabbinic Judaism by Boccaccini is, I think, a great one if you're looking for more. And then Lester Grabe has a book as well that is Judaic religion in the Second Temple period that goes through some of this. So if you're looking for walkthroughs of some of the traditions, they also have like a great 4-volume, very expansive series if you really want a lot. But there are a lot of good conversations here.
I think those are on your reading list.
I think maybe these are all like things that are on reading lists or materials that I'm working through with Phineas as we're talking about these traditions. And there's a lot there.
I would also point you to the conversation that I had with Bill Schniedewind. Because he talks about how, because we're learning that synagogues existed earlier and earlier than we previously thought 40, 50 years ago, that the Pharisees already had in place a theological mechanism that would allow them to survive the destruction of the temple. And it's when the temple's destroyed and the Sadducees can't survive without, sacrifice in the temple and without this structure, the Pharisees are able to survive beyond the temple and into the diaspora when they're banned after 135, when Hadrian bans Jews from Jerusalem and they go into the diaspora. They're able to do that. And this is when the Christians and the Pharisees begin saying, "Oh, no, we're not them and we're not them." And this is where we see that the beginning of anti-Semitism within these early movements, because the Christians are trying to prove that they are not Jewish. They are not. We are Jews. Most of us are Jewish, but we're not them. Yeah. And the Pharisees are trying to say, no, we're not those Christians who like to kiss each other, greet each other with a kiss and call each other brother and sister. We're not those guys. We're this old ancient religion, that some zealots got in the way. Ask Josephus, right? See, it was the zealots who caused the problem, not us. We're philosophical. And this is where these stories basically get to be rewritten into the Christian history and into the rabbinic history.
So Constellation Pegasus, thank you for your question. I want to turn to a side question that we've had some emails about that kind of goes in 2 ways. And I think this is largely dependent on the time of the year that it is. If you are a student and you're applying to grad schools, this question might be interesting for you. One of them is I just got accepted to grad school. What do I need to do to get ready between now and when I start? And I think a secondary question that we could throw in here is, maybe if you're not there yet, but you're interested in doing grad school in the future, let's say you're a junior in undergrad, or you're interested in maybe you did undergrad and you've had a break and you're coming back. What do I need to do to get ready or to apply? So if we start with I got accepted and I've got this semester and then the summer before I start.
Right.
What would you say they should do to get ready?
If you've already gone through the process and you have been fortunate enough to be accepted into graduate school, congratulations. This is becoming harder and harder, believe it or not, as budgets get cut at universities and they have to be more selective. Congratulations. Take 5 minutes and celebrate.
I absolutely do that.
Right.
Because the train keeps rolling. So take some time to take a breath and do that.
Right. And, again, this happened to me years ago. This happened to you not a little more recently. I would do a couple of things. One, begin contacting your university that you're going to be attending. You got to find this balance of don't bug your professors or those who will be your professors, but reach out and say, ask the question, what should I be doing now to prepare? Ask the very question that you just asked us. It makes us, as a professor, look like, oh, this person wants to get ahead. This person's on. We made a good choice. That's what we want to hear from. And maybe, can I get a copy of the reading list? When you do a PhD, there's a master reading list for your subject area. So the Second Temple Judaism reading list, we've got it in place. And can I get a copy of that reading list? I'd like to get started reading over the summer or something like that. The other person that you absolutely must contact, if you haven't already done so, this is the person that's been coordinating the admissions files, is the departmental admin. I'm the DEO. I'm the chair of the department here at the University of Iowa. I can't do anything without my departmental admin. Departmental admin makes the entire department flow, makes it work, and I'll forget all these things, and our admin makes everything work. Email that admin and say, is there anything I need to get to you? Are there forms? And begin to build a relationship with that admin. The admin is never wrong. The admin is always right. You need to do whatever the admin tells you. This is just a promo, and all praise to the departmental admin. That admin is going to be your source of life as a graduate student.
Yes.
Bring them cookies, bring them flowers, bring them cards, remember their birthdays. This is what you want to do. By the way, that goes for every faculty member, and that goes for every student in the program already. Admins, people working at the front desk there need to be shown appreciation, because they're the ones bearing the brunt of a lot of these budget cuts, and they're having to do more and more work because people around them, they're just not being hired to fill in these jobs. So one, as for your reading list. Two, get to know that departmental admin very quickly. Number three, you probably started to do this before you applied, but continue to go to SBL or go to ASOR or to go to these professional conferences so that you can not only network with scholars, but that you can continue to pick up books at a discount, right? So you want to pick up your discount books, but you want to see what good scholarship looks like. And so you want to go to papers, identify some papers that if you're not already giving a paper, if you're not already presenting, you want to find some people who are in the field you're going to be working with, certainly the professors that are at the university you're going to be attending, and you want to start attending those papers, going to those seminars, and hearing what good scholarship looks like. You're also going to be afforded the opportunity to hear what bad scholarship looks like. You're going to hear some bad papers as well, and you can begin seeing what it takes to make a good paper and a good presentation, and what bad ones look like as well.
I think a note on this that is important, that sometimes if you haven't gone before, you may not know, is anyone that is a member of the Society of Biblical Literature can go to the conference. So if you're not in grad school, or if you're in between undergrad and grad, and you want to go to that, You register and you can go and you can attend those things. You don't have to be a professor to go or a grad student to go. If you're just interested, if you're like, next year it's in Boston. If you live in Boston and you're like, I would like to go and hear some of this, you can register, you can go to those, you can see what papers you want to go to. They're open for anybody to come in because there's all kinds of a variety of people that are there. So that is something, if you are interested in, that anybody can tap into. I think one thing I would add to your list, in the reading list conversation, in taking the moment as well to like celebrate the accomplishment, don't make yourself do too much over the summer.
Right.
Like you do need to, it's good to do some reading ahead to try to get your legs under you a little bit, but also know that when the semester starts, you are going to be very busy.
Yeah.
And so take some time as you're prepping to take some time for yourself. Don't overload yourself so that you are exhausted by the time the semester starts, because then you're behind already. And you feel like I'm trying to do all this to get ahead, but you've set yourself back by then being so burnt out from reading or trying to read everything on the Greek reading list or everything on the Hebrew reading list, and it's just too much. You should be doing some.
Yeah.
Keep your feet wet, stay in it, but do it in a way that makes you excited for the year to start, in a way that's eager for the year to start, but not in a way that is overwhelming. You shouldn't feel like it's the day before finals week when you're about to start class. So try to give yourself a balance, which I think is where contacting the professors to say, out of this list, where should I start? What's important for the class that's going to be offered in this next year? Because maybe there's a text or a couple of them that you should start with that they can identify that this is going to be really important for the seminar this coming semester. So if you haven't read this one, it's a good background. Read this one.
The other thing I would say is talk to or try to make friends with, try to make contact with the existing graduate students that are in the program. Hopefully when you applied, before you were accepted, maybe you came on a campus visit and you were introduced to some of these students, but try to make contact with some of the students that are there. It is important to the greatest extent possible to develop a cohort. To this day, the cohort that I went through my UCLA program with, these are my closest friends. You've seen some of them here on the program. They carried me through some of the low points. It's no secret. I've mentioned it here before. I wanted to quit my PhD program 3 or 4 times, right? This is very natural in a PhD program. And it was those individuals who were there going through the program with me, experiencing this on their own, that we were able to be there for each other. And to this day, those are still my very closest friends. I have my friends from high school that were there for me doing this, and I have my friends from the PhD program that I cannot talk to them for 6 months because we're all busy and doing our stuff. And then something will happen and I'll get a text out of the blue that will make me just burst into tears or burst out laughing because these guys are still so close to me. So try to begin making that cohort. These are the people who are going to bail you out, not necessarily of prison, but maybe. But
hopefully.
You need to have money. You need to have your finances in order, at least to the greatest extent possible. You need to get your housing figured out. You need to, but also you need to go on a drive to a national park and sit by a lake and just relax and try to start building that cohort so that you can make it, because it's a taxing. I mean, Jordan.
It is. I mean, it is. There's a lot, and the number of things you feel like you should be doing or accomplishing is always more than you have time for. And so you've got to make decisions of, I can't do that part, I have to do this part, which then leads to all the questions in your mind of, well, what's that going to do?
Right.
But inside of that, the cohort can be helpful.
Right.
Having faculty that you can rely on can be really helpful of balancing those things together. Keeping in touch with people from previous institutions that you have, all of those things are essential. And I'd say too, you can't trust all of the things you see about the people that are very happy to tell you their journeys. Right. And when everything feels too smooth or too easy on the person's conversation about how I got into this program or all of the things that I'm doing, and you're looking at yourself and going, I'm really slogging through this stuff. Why don't I? It's hard for everyone.
Right.
Everyone may not be comfortable sharing that it's hard for them or the difficulties because we feel like we always have to have it all together.
Right.
But it's hard for everybody. Yeah. So if you are seeing that overly polished version, know that there's going to be things that that person is having a hard time with too, whether it's their coursework or their reading or their writing, or they're having a hard time finding a topic for something.
Right.
Everybody's struggling with something. It's just everyone may not be comfortable sharing that at all the time. So if you're feeling that way, if you're in grad school, or if you're looking at applying for grad school, if you were an undergrad and you're looking at the social media feed version of this, that's not always 100%. Some people are honest and they're truthful about the difficulties, and other people aren't, but it's different. Bob and I both had non-traditional journeys into grad school, where we did our undergrad, you did something else, you come back, and so there's many ways in. Right. It doesn't have to be I finish and I go right in and everything. That can be your path. That is a path for people, but it's not the only one. There's a diversity of ways to do this, a diversity of paths to do this.
Right.
That you have to have people you can trust, though, to help you through it.
And the other thing I would say is, once you're in, be honest. Be truthful in when your advisor says, "Hey, how you doing?" Be truthful. Be honest. Find a good advisor. I've said this. I mean, I dedicated a book to mine. I had the best advisor that you could ask for in Bill Schniedewind. If you get a good advisor, it makes all the difference in the world. And I had one of the best. And I try to pay this forward to Jordan. I want to emulate the way in which Bill was an advisor to me. I want to try to see every individual grad student as who they are. I want Jordan to be the best version of himself. I don't want to clone a mini me. I want him to be more successful than I am. And that's what every parent wants for their kids. And that's what every advisor. I don't want to be that arrogant individual that says, well, but I'm going to take the credit for all the things. I got tenure, right? I want Jordan to get a job, and I want Jordan to be more successful than I am. And that's what Bill always wanted. He always took every opportunity that he could. And he did this for all of us in the program, to try to lift us up and to give us credit and to promote us. And so try to find a good advisor in the program if you haven't already identified one, and be honest, be loyal. Your department is not your enemy. Your department can do so much for you. Work with your department. Yeah. Become a part. Do what you can. Hopefully your department won't exploit you, and hopefully you don't feel exploited. But you want to try to be there. The other thing I always tell, and I've told Jordan this from the beginning, be present. Be present. If there's a colloquium, if there's something going on, if there's a pizza, a lunch hour or something, be present.
Yeah, showing up matters a lot.
Yeah, if you're out of sight, you're going to be out of mind when it comes to handing out scholarships or when it comes to handing out other things. I quote The West Wing a lot. I'm a big Aaron Sorkin fan. Decisions are made by the people in the room. You want to be in the room. You want to be present. So when you get there, don't be a commuter. I was a commuter student my first year at UCLA until I finally left my job that I was doing, and I came and I was a fully present student at UCLA, and that's when I really blossomed. That's when I really took off. So you want to be as present as possible in that department, especially in those early years, because then the department feels like, oh, we can ask Bob, we can ask Jordan, we can ask this person to do this for us and be reliable, and then they will invest in you, and that will help you with your career.
If you have additional questions about this process, because sometimes it can feel like such a gated conversation that you don't know if you're on the outside looking in and you have things and you don't have somebody to reach out to, send us emails. I think this is material that is very helpful if you're interested in this. So send us your questions. If there's people we can try to talk to that you're interested, I think this is something that could be helpful for us to try to touch on going forward with you. Kind of in this lane, follow-up from Constellation Pegasus here, a request for a reading list on Old Testament readings. I think if you have some versions of this list that we can upload, we can put some down in the description, and then we can put like a fuller version of it probably over on the Patreon page. We can tag that as something you can see for different readings. If you're looking to get started, if you're looking to flush out some of these topics, a reading list there. And a question here, a guest request that I think this sounds very great from Julian. They really enjoyed the Alexander the Great episodes with Justin Voorhees, also here from the University of Iowa.
Justin's brilliant.
Can we do one on the Echmenids or get Gad Barnea on to talk about Elephantine and Persian period Yahwism? I wrote these requests down because we're always looking for people that you are interested in hearing more from. So I'm happy to try to get some interviews scheduled to cover this type of material, because something we want to move into throughout this year as we're continuing to do is we want to stay with stuff that is Bible related, yes?
Right.
But there's so much connectivity and the conversations and questions about the Bible and everything that influences it, all those things coming together. So if these types of topics, if there's people that you want to hear from, individuals that you would like to hear about within the ancient world, some of those names, send us emails, leave us comments. We're always looking for things, so let us know.
That'd be a fun conversation with Gad Barnea.
I mean, we're getting a good list of names that we need to be contacting.
Fun.
So, yeah, if you're listening and you want to do, just send us an email. But that's I think those are two great topics, or really more than two, that we can try to get through here, because those are definitely things that we should come back around to.
And the list, we can put that up.
Yeah, we can put up a list. I think that's a very helpful thing, because there's some of these that, I mean, having read your reading list, that then there's things that inform the way we're talking about specific topics because of readings that we have done in mutual or in common. And some of those I think would be very helpful starting points, especially if you are, you're interested in returning to that grad school conversation of applying in a year or two, and you don't have a specific reading list you can turn to yet. Maybe this can be a starting point for you. So that's something we'll upload. We'll put some names down in the description. We'll do a larger list probably on Patreon. I'll put something in the description when we have that list there of where you can find the fuller list, whether there's a nice place on the website to put it, whether there's a better place on Patreon to put it. We can put something somewhere. So look down there, and that will direct you to where that is going to be housed, because that's a good type of thing to have. I think that kind of wraps us up for today, Bob. I know you have to run here. And so for March, free-for-all, we've covered a lot, as a free-for-all is. I think that was a fairly broad topics. If you are watching on replay and you have a question that you would like us to address, send us an email, leave a comment down below. We're always looking for people you want us to talk to, or things for next month's live, if you can join us there. Or as we said at the beginning, you can join us on Patreon and send a question will be answered in next month's live. So however you can find us, We have regular podcasts that come out every week. Lives are now becoming one of those like extra over-the-top types of things. So we have an interview that came out today about Nabatean burial customs and the ideas of the afterlife there with Dr. Lucy Wadeson. Go and check that out. You have this here. We're happy to have you with us wherever you find us. So thank you so much for being a part. Thank you to all of our Patreon supporters. Thank you to everyone who asked a question today and supported us here. We really appreciate you. Bob, thank you for taking the time. Is there anything you want to leave us with today outside of, go Hawks, let's beat Ohio State?
That's right. Thank you again to all of our supporters. Again, thank you for those who not only come here to support us, but who go to Patreon and who are part of that sustaining support. It's the price of a cup of coffee per month that go in there and provide that support, that allow us to bring in additional undergraduate students, to allow us to edit these videos and to provide even more content. And as always, as Jordan said, we're always looking for ideas. We want to provide the content that you want to see, that you want to know about. Otherwise, we're going to nerd out on the things that I want to study, and it's going to
we will do.
Yeah, all Melchizedek all the time. But we'd rather talk about the things that you want to hear about. So the best place to do that is to leave comments here, or to go to Patreon and let us know what you want to hear, and we'll be happy to provide that for you.
All right, I think that wraps us up. Like, subscribe wherever. This one's on YouTube, so find us here. You can find us on Apple and Spotify. The regular call to action type of things. But thank you so much for tuning in, for being with us here today. If you're watching on replay, thanks for watching on replay. We hope to have you with us live in the future. But if not, the replays are there. That's what they're there for. Bob, thank you for taking the time. Fun, as always. For all of us here at Bible and Archaeology, thank you for tuning in. Until next month.
Yeah, I still don't dance, so this is the place to find me, not dancing on Instagram.
See you next time.